Welcome, everyone, to the Connector Next Door and to another special conversation with another connector that I have been following for a while, but not in a stalkery way, but in a way where I have just been so enjoying the work that you're doing. Stacy, what a gift to have you on and to have this conversation about connection that is so important to us as planners, no matter what we're planning, if it's a meeting or a community gathering or amazing, fantastic community building events like what you do. This is a gift to have this conversation with you and get your insight today. Welcome here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation today.
You've been traveling a bit, so tell us a little bit before we dive in. Where have you been? Where are you coming from? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I am based in Fairfax, Virginia. That's where we're headquartered at 6 Degrees. And I'm actually from California. I grew up in Southern California, but I
Hmm.
moved here as a transplant about 12 years ago. So it I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is home now. Like
Oh,
I'm
very cool.
I'm an East Coast girl. And so Northern Virginia is right outside of Washington, D.C., to give it some perspective for those that aren't familiar.
Yeah.
And I have been all over it recently. I was in New York last week, and the day after I was in Los Angeles, and then back here to DC. So there are seasons that we do quite a bit of traveling for my job.
Yeah. And I love when you're posting about it because it is the real life of connecting with the community, right? I think especially since COVID, connections have expanded and there have been things that have opened up to people that are planning events where there is no borders, really. There
Mhm.
really aren't the same kind of maybe hesitation or restrictions as there used to be. And so I really appreciate having this conversation. We're up here in snowy Calgary right now. We've got such a dump this weekend. So you come over and ski sometime and we'll set you up.
Yeah, I love that area. I've been there a couple times now. Kind of landed there. I went to a TED conference in Banff
Ah,
in 2016, I believe, which was
oh,
my first time in
fantastic.
Canada, and it was beautiful. And then last summer, spent some time in Golden. So landed in Calgary and drove
Mm.
up through Banff into Golden. We have some friends that live there, but did a
Ah,
lot of hiking during the summer. It's gorgeous.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you just need like winter tires. In the winter,
Yeah,
it's still
yeah.
gorgeous up here.
Yeah.
Just got
Oh,
to be more careful.
absolutely. A little cold for this Southern California
Exactly.
girl. I don't know if I'm completely ready for a true Canadian winter.
Well, you can just sort of fly in, fly out. Then,
Yeah.
a nice place to visit, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. Really, the conversation starts with you. The conversation starts with connection. It starts with the opportunity for us to learn what you think and know connection to be in your life. Are you open to starting there? If you would just maybe share with us, what do you see in your world or for yourself? What does connection mean to you?
Connection. Wow. I mean, this is a perfect question for someone in the work that I do, especially with 6 Degrees, because we are focused on creating connection and amplifying the importance of connection. For me, connection is where everything begins and ends. Without connection, we can't really tap into our humanity.
Mm,
I believe we're not creatures that are meant to go at it alone. And so often we hear a lot of language and philosophy that says, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and, be
mm,
self-made and be that go-getter and you don't need anybody, you can do all things yourself. And it's a lot of me centric language. And I
mm,
think that can be really dangerous. I get it because we're trying to encourage people to start where they are. But we really do need each other. And connection, I believe, is the heart of everything that makes us human. It is what makes us well. It is where we find joy. It is where we find purpose, meaning. And in my life, if I hadn't had the connections that I've had, the people in my life that have really stood beside me, I know I wouldn't be where I am today.
mm.
So my work, both professionally and personally, is really centered around the importance of connection.
It's interesting that you started with that because I was listening to your TED talk recently. You did a TEDx talk in Fargo, I believe. And
Fargo.
that was one thing I wrote down in my notes was that we idealize the self-made person, and that sometimes we need to remind ourselves that no one makes it anywhere completely alone.
Mhm.
And we do sometimes say, especially as entrepreneurs, sometimes we say, well, this is the journey, right? This is the joke and the joy and all the things about doing this yourself. I've been experiencing that myself, 16 years in business, and there's lots of ups and downs. And my husband really
Yeah.
doesn't understand. My mom doesn't understand what I do. And a
Mhm.
lot of people around don't necessarily get the work of it, and so we make an excuse that we're alone, right? Or we make
Mhm.
that excuse that well, I guess it's just going to be me. But then there is a bit of that, well, look at what I've done, look at what
Mhm.
I accomplished. And the reality is, especially when we look at our communities around us, past, present, future,
Yeah.
um, there are so many voices, so many perspectives that
Mhm.
allow us to see the world in a different way and adopt different ways of being and doing life that can be different than what we've known, or more enhanced, or
Mhm.
maybe healthier than what we've known before. You do talk a little bit in your TED talk about a crisis in your life and how that seemed to hit home, what the small moments, those small connections have
Yeah.
done for you and have meant to you. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years ago in 2017, my mom suffered a stroke, and she was in California at the time. I was here, and I hopped on a flight, flew there for the next 17 days, slept on that little couch in the hospital room next to
Mm,
her through ICU and a lot of touch and go moments. And because of the severity of the stroke, she was permanently disabled and had to go through acute therapy facilities. And then, my brother tried to bring her home for a period of time, and we had nursing care. But eventually she needed 24-hour round the clock care. Um, and I have my brother and my sister, there's three of us. We are extremely close. And this situation only enhanced that, which I'm extremely grateful for.
mm,
And what I will say during that time is when my mother, who is my best friend, I talk to her every day, all day long. Sometimes we would just sit silently
mhm,
on the phone while we were doing things. When that's taken away from you in that capacity, and eventually I was grateful that we got some of that back before we lost her in 2020. But when you're in that type of tragic, heartbreaking time, often you will have kind of one or of two um, interactions with people that show up or people that don't show up. And that's not to say anything bad about those that don't. There's often a really well-intentioned excuse, right?
mm,
Um, they feel terrible. They don't know what to say. They're afraid that they're going to remind you of something, as if any moment your mind is on anything else, anyways, right?
mm,
But it's a lot of, I don't want to make things worse. I don't want to say the wrong thing, or it reminds them of their own trauma or grief. Um, and really, what I found was in that moment, the people that, even if they didn't know what to say, sent a note to me that just said, "I'm praying for your mom. I'm thinking of her every day." I talk about in the TED Talk, a friend that just wrote my mom's name on her hand, and it was in
mhm,
permanent marker. And every day she's just wanted me to know, you don't need to respond. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for your mom. Those were moments that it made me cling to hope. And also, I knew that when I had nothing else to give, other people were standing beside me,
mm,
however far away. What is hard in those moments are when the people that you believe would be there in times like that don't show up.
yeah,
Oftentimes, that is the most glaring.
mm,
People that you thought would be a part of your life long after my mom passed away that just kind of disappeared. Um,
mm,
and you start to realize, well, these aren't bad people. right? Um, they're just not thinking about why it's important to lean into the uncomfortable. I talk about
Mm.
us needing to get comfortable because where we have discomfort, we can grow in compassion.
Mm.
Um, we have to stop thinking about ourself and our own comfort level. We need to start thinking about what it looks like to show up for people in times of need. And in everyday life, we needed to make it something that is a habit again,
Yeah.
so that we know that when something happens to us, we're met with that same type of compassion and support. Um, I truly believe that we're in a really critical time in our culture, in our society, where we are turning so inside. We're looking inward and we're not really thinking about others. We're not really thinking about how our words, our actions affect the multitudes around us. And it's almost encouraged to just be authentic and be genuine and say what's on your mind, um, instead of really thinking about kindness, love,
Mm.
empathy, support, right?
Yeah.
And so my work really is stemming around how do we get people showing up for each other again in genuine ways, simple ways. This is not to overcomplicate things, but getting comfortable with things that aren't always convenient.
Isn't it amazing when we talk about connection, and it has become a buzzword, I think, it
Mhm.
has been one of those things we talk about, particularly since the pandemic, but the discomfort in connection
Mhm.
and how we have to work at it. And sometimes we feel like, well, if it isn't naturally happening, if it's, not something that, just in a class I'm taking or at work, I don't have a best friend or I don't have whatever it
Yeah.
is. And we just maybe ruminate about those things, but don't necessarily say, well, what would it take to really connect? And for many of us, that is a really uncomfortable self-talk conversation where we have to say, okay, now what does it mean to truly, and not with necessarily an agenda. And I think when we were
Yeah.
talking earlier about um, sort of the silos we live in, or the communities maybe that we've just got blinders on, or as entrepreneurs we stay in our bubbles or whatever it is, and the really the joy of connection isn't that we're going to get something necessarily from it that we have prearranged that we've
Yeah.
got, we're walking in and we're saying, well, this is the reason I'm going to go is because I can, go get XYZ. But being curious about it and just saying that there could be something within that connection that could serve both of us. And I
Mhm.
think if we step forward in curiosity, it does help maybe some of that discomfort
Mhm.
where we know it will be, like you say, discomfort, or it might be uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but we can truly allow ourselves to play with it a little bit and just to say, what could it look
Yeah.
like? And in the middle of crisis, there is honestly no better time, I think, to get beyond ourselves and just to
Mhm.
say, I can't actually do this alone, that
Yeah.
there needs to be others in the mix.
Curiosity is key.
Mm,
And I do believe something that you're touching on is that we can't have expectation, because
right.
that's where we get let down. This expectation that we're going to show up for someone and they're not going to be so overtly grateful and say, this is exactly what I needed, and we're going to feel good about ourselves. And needing that goes back to the self. You're
Yeah.
doing it for yourself. You're doing it for your own self validation. Now, when you do things out of genuine care and kindness, and it is a practice, right? Um, you will receive those benefits. I mean, there's a lot of physiological things that happen with our brain, our mental health, reduction in anxiety, depression, those sorts of things when you do acts of service or kindness or acts of humanity, as I call them. And and so I think you see that in the long term and even sometimes in the immediate. But I think if you're leaning in with this expectation,
Mm,
then you'll never receive the full benefit. Um, and it will not be as effective for you as an individual in terms of the longevity. I think this goes back to nonprofit work that we do. We're at 6 Degrees, we're really focused on ensuring that people do not extort those that they're serving, by taking their stories and their faces and their trauma and using it as a way to fundraise and to, get people to open up their wallets. And that is it's like really a traditional philanthropic
Mm.
process. Like that's what people do. They want the heartstrings to move. And I believe there's ways of telling stories and using stories that put dignity at the center. I say dignity is in the details, that you can create that feeling of really supporting another human being and doing what's best for them without needing to hear the thank you,
Yeah.
without needing to see them receive the gift, or the
Mhm.
transformation. Um, and realizing that you're doing a greater service, allowing these people to have the dignity and the anonymity in who they are. And I think that's really critical.
And it doesn't affect our feeling of connection. I think that that's what's so beautiful about what you're saying, is that traditionally maybe that has been just a way of proving ourselves, maybe in the nonprofit world or in
Mhm.
what the work we're doing is, when we get that thank you, or when we get that picture, or when we're seen with somebody, that we're helping, or the beneficiary is somehow in the shot. And I think that I love that you brought up the nonprofit side of this, because when we're talking about a personal connection, something that is, we're stepping in, we're curious, we don't necessarily have an agenda. There are a lot of people out there listening to this saying, yes, but I've got measurements and I've got results
Mhm.
and I've got an event that I've got to do, and da da da, all these things that we need to show that what we're doing and the money that I'm getting paid, or the partnership that we've put together, is worth it in the end. What does that look like in your world? Like, is that something where you manage, or you set up those expectations before you step in, or how do you try to translate what happens on that very personal basis into more of a collective way to connect with others?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think it begins with talking to the local nonprofit. So a little bit about Six Degrees is that we are an amplifier of other local and grassroots nonprofits. Although we're national and focused domestically in the United States, we support organizations that are doing really impactful work, but they don't have big marketing budgets and celebrities to have a media moment. And often they're in the work, they're doing the really critical work, and we
Mm,
want to help them cast a wider net, right, to get the support that they need. And so the first thing we do is we center them in their stories. And even if they are an organization that has clearances and they're okay with showing pictures and that sort of thing, we just have kind of a stance that that is not something we want to do. So the images we tend to show are of those in connection, the volunteers that are coming together, building essential resource kits for those organizations. We like to show pictures of the leaders in that organization or their volunteers and their program managers, and let them kind of tell the stories and tell the anecdotes. And because storytelling is powerful,
mhm,
when you lean in and you're listening to a podcast like this, or some other short form content, you can see it and you can visualize it.
mhm,
There's ways to use different types of B-roll, right, that still evoke something and tell a story, but there's still an anonymity. It's not always easier, it's more equitable. That's what we believe. It's
mhm,
not something that we're saying, "Oh, this is, less cost effective and it's easier than just getting the shot and getting the testimonial on tape," right? But it's what we believe allows people to have the most dignity that they deserve to have. I don't think you should need to see someone's face in order to want to serve a person and help that person. And I think that our fundraising and campaign mechanisms have proven that that's the case in terms of our impact and our reach and the people that have kind of tuned in to learn more and support. Um, so and that's not like I said, it's not to say that these other organizations are doing something wrong. I think there's a lot of people that disclose they're over 18 and they say, I want to tell my story. This is empowering for me. That's a different conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's about someone having choice and not feeling like they may not lose something and if they say no to that, right? If they
Right.
don't sign the waiver. So there's a power dynamic at play, even in the nonprofit world, that I think we have to be really sensitive to.
Hmm. And it's interesting in the what I am seeing on social media that you're posting, and just the energy and the joy and the hugs, and there's just a lot happening in the storytelling that you're doing. Um, do you do you get that sense that people are feeling personally connected to the cause, as opposed to just connected to the organization or the work? Are they personally feeling energized about what's happening on site?
Absolutely. And I think that for a long time, Six Degrees was agnostic of causes and pillars. If we woke up and we felt like there was a need that day, we would spin up a campaign and a story about that organization. And it made us very nimble, but it also made it really hard to fund our organization. A few years ago, we kind of took stock of the last, say, 5 years of campaigns that we had been doing, the projects we'd been working on, and we realized everything really fell into these four spaces: youth empowerment, equity and justice, what we call building sustainable living environments, and emerging crisis. And so that allowed us to support the types of organizations that we felt like were the most critical. They were helping the most marginalized of populations, and where we believed our heart really was in this work and our expertise could do the most good.
Mm.
Um, and in those moments of wait, stop. What was the question? So cut back. I totally forgot your question.
It's okay. The question was, do you find that the people that are participating are feeling a personal
Yes.
connection
Okay.
to the
And I
work?
can actually connect so that you can cut out this part while I
It's
ask the
all
question.
good.
Okay. Um, so with those four pillars, what it allows us to do is to build these campaigns that are very specific, but they fall within one of these cause areas. And what we find is when we do a story, a podcast episode, a short form piece of content, or long form piece of content, we will see a huge increase of activity on our socials and
Mm,
engagement and sharing, and people then saying, "Me too. That's my
mm,
story. This has happened to me." We just won an award for two Silver Anthem Awards. We're really excited for a campaign that we called the Disability Allyship Series with Jeremy Andrew Davis, who's a disabled person who's also a producer and actor and creative and content creator. And we centered him and the stories that he tells, and we combine that with our audience, and the an audience that may not know a lot about how to be a true ally
mhm.
to the disability community, the language that's appropriate to use. We just did one video that I was actually very excited about, because I said, you know what, Jeremy, I hear people say, don't say disabled, say differently abled.
I
I'm like,
watched that one.
you watched it, right?
Yeah,
And I
so
said, I think we should do
so
a video
good.
on it. I was like, we
Yeah,
should just do a video that addresses that, because I
yeah.
feel like that's like the new PC thing. And people are thinking that like, that's just how everyone wants to be referred to. And he dropped some truth bombs. And I mean, the amount of people within the disabled community and allies of them that just shared countless stories. It was really our first viral LinkedIn post.
Mm,
And then across every platform, I mean, it's been a few weeks since we posted it. We still see story shares and reshares every single day. It awakened a community of people that we had always been welcomed in and tried to be inclusive of, but we really centered their voices and showed that we were trying to show up so that people could be more educated and truly allies to them. And so, yes, in that way, people do very much connect with the work and the singular stories. And we're really shifting at 6 degrees to say we are a storytelling agency and we believe that storytelling has the power to help people become more empathetic, bridge divides, help people to understand one another more, become just, more tolerant even, right? That
Yeah.
there's just such division, not just around, the United States. I think we're seeing it around the world. And
Mhm.
so we're really coming up with mechanisms to track that impact so that when we do share these stories, we can talk about the widespread metric of change that we're seeing in our audiences and why stories are important and why that's something that people should want to fund. When we're in a world right
Yeah.
now where people are banning books, right? And banning history, parts of history, and retelling it in
Mhm.
ways that are not centered on truth, it becomes very dangerous. And so it is really critical that those people that have the stories to tell, those stories are uplifted in places that are accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
So if it can't be told in the schools, if it can't be read there, then we're going to put it online and we're going to make it accessible that someone else can come across these kind of pieces of education and learn things for themselves.
Yeah. And as you're telling that story, it does make me think of the friend that wrote your mom's name on her
Mhm.
hand, and that you're essentially doing that for others, where you're writing their name on your hand and sharing it and just saying, you don't need to respond, but we're here and we see you. And this is important. And there will be more people that will have an opportunity to share and understand and take their own perspective of it. I think when it has a life of its own, it will go into places that we have no idea. That story will
Mhm.
be retold in lots of different ways. That's the beauty of it. I
That's
just need
so
to take
deeply
a
kind, Lisa. Thank you. That's so
just need
sweet.
a, need a breath there for a second. That was beautiful. Um, I don't know why that's really emotional.
Thank you. Thank you. I do think it's important to
Sorry.
no, don't apologize because I do think it's really, really critical to tell people those types of things. And I thank you for spending a moment to tell me that because I didn't make that connection. But I do believe that um since I was a little girl, I've had a lot of empathy. Um a lot of empathy, and I've always wanted to kind of fight for the person that isn't seen or cared for or is different. And sometimes people are like, but where is the long-term impact here,
Right.
And I
Right.
do think there's so much power in someone seeing that someone values them and they won't back down from the fear mongering and the trolls and the people that are going to spread a lot of hate and hateful messages and attacks because I have been that person where someone has said derogatory things to me, discriminatory things to me, and no one has spoken up. I
Mm.
mean, more times than I can count, quite frankly. And it is deeply painful when you have to be the one that speaks up for yourself when all these people that supposedly love you or care about you or really good people just don't want to get involved or didn't know what to say and didn't speak up, right? And I don't want people to ever feel that way. And I know
Mhm.
that people feel that way every second of every day. So the least thing that we can do is create a space for people that say, we see you, you're loved, you're worthy, you're valued, we're different.
Mhm.
I'm glad that we're different. It
Mhm.
makes us better.
And that we have that opportunity to sit with each other in
Yes.
whatever it is. Because I would guess that no matter what event you're putting together or what the bags are or what's in the bags, um, events are one of those things that come and go. And I often talk about moving past the one hit wonders. Like it's just like the one event, the one signature event, or the one thing that we plan for all year. And I call events connection points over time. And how are we making multiple connection points with a
Yes.
community or with our team or with the people that not just matter to us, but matter in the big scope of things? over time. And that's, I think you talk about that a little bit in your craft method. If maybe we could jump into that, but the idea of
Yeah.
consistency over time. Um, and that's part of that discomfort. I think sometimes when we choose to be involved in somebody's life, or take on a cause, or say yes, put our hand up and start working in a community, or start working in a place where we're going to make a difference, the consistency can be scary, because it does
Mhm.
mean that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's going to come. I grew up where my family, I don't know if you know Winnipeg here in Canada, but where my family was working in downtown Winnipeg, and very similar to you, it was people need to be seen. Like, people feel invisible here, or there's
Yeah.
lots of transitions in life that were so difficult, and some really hard things. And I just thought, if I can do something in the world, then it truly needs to be that I'm amplifying their voices, or at least giving them a platform. And who knows what that would even look like. But the consistency of showing up and showing up and
Mhm.
showing up. Yes, there's going to be more difficult days, or there will be times when we don't know what story to tell. But I do believe that as we start to see within us what's awakening in us, in that it does become, like you shared about your own life, something that you can't unsee it.
Mhm.
And so I'm guessing let's jump in. If you could tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
the craft method, and then I
Yeah.
would love to hear where 6 degrees and you kind of found the intersection, like how you got started with what this was like. But let's talk a little bit. Could you unpack the craft method for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the craft method is a tool that I developed to help us to show up better in our communities, to what I call remodel our societies. And so it's an acronym. The C stands for consistency, R is remodeling, A is acknowledgement, F is focus, and T is tracking. And like you mentioned with consistency, we all know it takes 21 days to build a habit and those sorts of things, but it's also one of those things that we have to like rewire our brain. It's shifting of mindset, right? And you need to practice something, and you need to make sure that you have it scheduled out. You need to make sure that you're making time for it, that you're committing to it. One of the things about consistency that I don't touch on in the talk, because it's, 12 minutes, is that there's a lot of damage that comes to others when we're not consistent, when
Mm,
we don't consistently show up. And I mean, we can look at our youth, right? What it
yeah.
feels like when they have a trusted adult in their life that then stops showing up for them in some type of way, and the long-term damage those types of things can cause. And so consistency is really multi-pronged, but in this specific model, I talk about scheduling time every single day that you look to do something of service. And um, I encourage people to do things in person, but it could be so much as picking up a phone call and saying, "Hey, I know you don't have time this middle of the day. I just wanted to say, like, I'm thinking of you. And how can I show up for you right now in the current season of life that you're in?" Or,
Mm,
"Hey, I wanted to check in on your mom. I know that she had that stroke a month ago, and just want to let you know, when you're ready to talk, I'm here." Right. It could be going to a coffee shop and holding the door for someone. It could be buying the person a cup of coffee behind you, right? Or it could just be
mhm.
in the elevator telling someone, "I really like that dress that you're wearing. That's beautiful." Making someone feel seen. And it's important to do it every single day, and block that time out and take that time seriously as you would take doing your expense report.
Yeah.
The R is something I call a remodeling. So I think that often when we're practicing something new, we can foot fault, we can make mistakes. It's very easy. And it's also because we're very human. The I part is a hard beast to corral. And so I say that when we do make mistakes, or we falter, we don't show up and authentically, we instead of holding the elevator open, we find ourselves rushing and hitting the elevator shut, right? Those sorts of things. We need to acknowledge as quickly as
Yeah.
possible, use humility, and apologize for those things. um, I think it's really critical, because remodeling isn't just something for us. It also has this rippling effect to the community around us. That one tells them it's okay when they mess up to acknowledge it. There's no fear in acknowledging it. It also
Mhm.
helps people to want to have what they call a higher moral elevation. So it is a real thing that actually is backed by science that can help us to all improve, and to say it's okay to make mistakes, and to say sorry, and to say, I'm going to own that. And other people
Yeah.
say, no problem. Thank you for doing that. Like, let's,
Yeah.
you know, let's keep it moving. A is acknowledgement. And that is, like, say, it is really hard to build connected, healthy communities. And we need to acknowledge that it's going to be hard. You're going to make these mistakes. That there's a lot of distractions in the world that are actually there to make it so that it's as hard as possible for us to focus on greater community and not just ourselves, right? We've built
Yeah.
a lot of, um, uh, we have believed a lot of lies, I will say. I talk about Darwin and how growing up, all we ever heard was survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah.
This idea that the strongest, quickest, brightest, they're going to succeed, and the weaker one is going to be left at the wayside. This idea that you need to fight for you and your own. But we don't talk about this later part of Darwin's work where he says, well, actually, it takes reciprocity and collaboration in order to be successfully evolved.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, what? You telling me we just totally forgot about that? You
Right.
know, like those types of things are by design, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't fit some agenda,
Yeah.
right? So it is critical that we uh really start examining what we've been made to believe, and we take some power back in that. So that's kind of that
Mhm.
acknowledgement. The focus is really around limiting distractions. I talk a lot
Mhm.
about how technology is built to capture as much of our time and attention as possible, and that we don't stand a chance. You know, like they've spent billions of dollars to say, how can we make sure that they scroll endlessly forever? Our brain patterns and how we think has been altered. Like,
Mm.
we can't focus past 2 or 3 moments. They say in the first 3 seconds, if you don't capture someone's attention, they're going to move past that. Can you imagine that? I mean, we both, Lisa, grew up in a time where, like, you had commercials. I remember when the first TiVo came out and I was like, TiVo, we can fast forward through commercials, right? Right
Yep.
now, the only time you watch a commercial is the Super Bowl. Let's be serious. Maybe the Olympics. Okay.
If
And
you
that's
even
because
watch TV and
if you
commercials.
even watch TV, right?
Yeah.
It's true. And that's if you have the cable package for the NFL or whatever, because outside of that, we're all streaming. Let's be serious, right? So it's this idea that you have to limit distractions. You need to leave your phones at home. You need to put them out of reach. I mean, Lisa, if we were sitting together having lunch and I had my phone up on the table, what would that convey to you?
That something could happen at any time
Yeah, and
that would pull you away.
that that something here is more important than
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It's subliminal. You might even say, I get it. She has kids. She has a big job, but it's still telling you that you are not as important as what is
Mm.
on this. I
Right.
want us to stop telling people that.
Yeah.
There should be nothing more important really than that person in front of you in that moment. You have an opportunity to connect and really make someone feel valued, right?
Mm.
If there's an emergency, someone will get a hold of you, right?
Yes.
And the last is tracking. I think it's important. Journaling is very powerful. I think it's important to document when you're going through these actions.
Mm.
To really commit to memory how you're feeling, how other people you see are reacting to it, so that we don't just tell our story of the tell ourselves stories of the negative, right? When something
Mhm.
negative happens, we're much more likely to repeat it and share it. That's why things like the good news movement that John Krasinski did during COVID was like, people were just clamoring onto it. They're like, this is amazing. This is just,
Yeah.
good stuff, because we were in such a pit of despair and darkness, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's really important to actually commit those to memory and to be able to look back, when
Mhm.
you're having a really low point, you're feeling really disconnected, you can
Yeah.
remind yourself of the things that others have done for you
Yeah.
that have made you feel seen, valued, connected. what you've been able to do for other people that show you're a vital part of your community. You are needed in your community. You are an actor. It doesn't matter if you you don't make the most money. You're not where you are in your career. You had some blocks and you weren't able to graduate with that, that degree in the time that you wanted to, right? We all have things that tell us that we're not enough. We're not good enough. Maybe when I get there, I'll be accepted and valued and a part. But I think that when we start telling ourselves the true story, we start seeing how our daily activities are impacting the most important part of our world, which is what's right around us, that we will start showing up better and stronger for each other and for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to this out there and you need some kind of a physical reminder, there's lots of ways. You can put sticky notes in your kitchen. You can take out a journal.
Yes.
I remember one of my life coaches years ago, she said, just buy a tiny little journal. And every time you exemplify something you want in your life, write it down. Like if you're driving through the drive-through, if you're, at your kid's soccer match or whatever it is, just make notes. And what a gift that is, I think, to the people that are listening too, because sometimes we feel like nothing's happening or we're not getting that support, or where do we feed in and where do we start to make an impact or a positive impact in the world. Because we feel like sometimes we're so small in the big picture of things. But what you're describing is giving us, I think, permission to lean in where we can and to remember those things that matter to us, because they will ultimately matter somehow in the bigger picture as well, if we just start to capture some of those things. What a beautiful method if we were to adopt those 5 things, if my math is correct.
That's right. Correct.
And I do have to say, the last time we chatted on Zoom, and you were in the middle of an appointment, and I felt completely seen and heard, even though you had a lot going on around you. And I was
getting my nails done, Lisa. I was getting my nails done. It was the only time I could get them done, but I tried to make you feel very centered.
Well, everyone's kind of rotating around you with all, asking you questions about what color or whatever it was. And I was wearing a toque at the time because I was just part of Talk to a Stranger week at, that morning. And I was in the middle of a cafe, and it just felt like there was a connection there. That whole focus piece of this is that you don't have to have ideal conditions to make somebody feel like they matter and that they're being seen. So that is really beautiful. And you are certainly living that out in what I've seen so far. So where has this, can you tell us a little bit more about 6 Degrees and where it started? What was, were you there at the beginning when it first started?
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know about 6 Degrees with Kevin Bacon, can you tell us sort of where the concept started and then how you got involved?
Yeah, I will try to do this in like as short a period as possible. But back in, I believe, 91, 3 college students were at Albright University in Jersey, and they were watching, it was late at night. They're probably drinking. They were watching a Kevin Bacon movie. The movie ended, and then another movie with him started. And they made this joke that I bet this Hollywood actor everyone can be connected to Kevin in 6 Degrees or Less, right? In the film specifically, right? And they kind of made it like a parlor drinking game, like at college parties. And this was way before the internet. So somehow I still am just like, how did that happen? But Kevin started getting asked about it, and he was like, he thought they were poking fun at him, like, oh, he's been in all these films and done all these things, but not known for any one thing, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But then he went to a late night show, and I forget which one it was, and they were also there, and they came in, they said, oh, we also invited these 3 guys, and he wanted to die. He was like, oh my goodness, to be kidding me. Like they're going to make fun of me on national television, whatever. But he said the guys then came in, and they were so kind and so warm and like very differential. And they're just like, you're such an incredible actor. You've been in all these films, completely different. Cause it's like imposter syndrome.
Of course.
Even Kevin can have imposter syndrome, right? Like, right. And he realized, oh no, that's not what they're saying. They actually love my career and respect my career and know I've been in a lot of
Mm,
things. Kevin's a character actor. So he's not like, I'm holding out for this one role, right? He's like, I want to do things. I'm an actor. I want to do things I haven't done before. I want to work with interesting people I haven't worked with before. I don't care if it's two sentences or the lead character, right?
yeah.
That's what makes him so diverse and such an incredible actor. So he leaned in years later. That was in 91. Around 2007, he started kind of asking himself that I've had a lot of success in my career. It's time to give back. But what do I have? He was kind of inspired by Newman's Own and the sauce. And he thought, okay, well, Paul Newman has this, he has this brand, right? Like, but what do I have? And he kind of kept going back to this 6 degrees with Kevin Bacon thing. And finally
It's not
said,
a sauce, but
it's not a sauce, but it is kind of a sauce, right?
yeah, okay.
At one
Secret
point,
sauce.
this was built into the Google algorithm. You could
Oh
look
my
up
goodness.
bacon number and find your bacon number if you were like an actor. So I mean, it's had some longevity, if you will.
Yeah.
So he decided I can take this thing, turn it on its head, and really make it so like anybody can be a celebrity for the causes they care about. Let's
Mm,
create moments of connection, of joy, of support, specifically for local grassroots nonprofits. There's a lot of great, huge national organizations, global organizations, but we believe that we can lend the most support to those that are on the smaller side, right? And they're doing really
mm,
impactful work, and we can lend some of our production, creativity, project management, PR support to those organizations to really help them tell a compelling story and get people engaged. So in 2007, I mean, it was a completely different iteration. It was really celebrities having a little badge that said, these are the causes I care about. And if their fans wanted to support them, they could. And then we did some good cards where people, for Christmas or the holidays, Hanukkah, you could give gifts of donations to causes that people cared about, which was very popular. And then we eventually had a map. When I came in 2016, we had a map where people could see, other celebrities could see different causes all around the country, different organizations that wanted a social media shout out, someone to attend their gala, someone to stop by their 5K run, those sorts of things and
ah,
engage. And it was kind of this interactive map. Um, and we just decided that we really wanted to drill down and have more local impact. Here we are in Fairfax, Virginia, but also be able to tell stories more nationally. So we've really settled on these kind of 3 programs, which are building kits by Kevin Bacon, which is the essential resource kits. We build a lot of kits with hygiene or mental health products that support the constituents that are being served by a multitude of nonprofits that we choose to partner with. And to date, we have distributed approximately 30,000 of these kits in the last year, and in
wow,
49 states. So
amazing.
our last state is South Dakota. We're coming for you, South Dakota. And so that has been a really powerful way for us to show up in community with
Yeah,
tangible resources. And then Cause Evolve is our production service where we tell stories about those organizations and the people that are impacted by them and the change makers on the ground, those that have given their life and their time and attention to really care for communities, because we believe they are the celebrity, they are the star. And we hope by telling those stories, it'll inspire other
mm,
communities to say, I could do that here. I could do a
yeah,
version of that here. I'm inspired to think about how I can show up and serve in a better way. And then our third program is Degree Shift, and that's probably one of our oldest programs. And that's where we really build these convener campaigns. Think, pediatric cancer. We bring together 3 or 4 different organizations that are tackling it in different ways and showing up for families and communities different ways. Create a hashtag, an awareness piece to it, and really go online in a widespread media push to get people thinking about it and
yeah,
engaging and supporting. And what we love most about these campaigns is we've seen them replicated. So we might do one in the Mid-Atlantic region that starts there, but then Minnesota picks it up, and Texas, and then we saw Spain pick it up, and it kind of goes on and on. And it's really, really powerful when you see that you can create something that's replicable, that is like a blueprint for other communities, and really can make make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And how it connects to me is when I came in as their executive director in 2016, um, Kevin and I both really have always been centered on connection is important. People don't just like connection, we actually need it as human beings. And so creating ways that people can plug into these community organizations and show up, feel that sense of joy, also feel that sense of belonging and connection is really powerful. That gets people from just doing things once and becoming an ongoing volunteer, board member, donor, supporter, right? Sharing
Mm-hmm.
things online, feeling engaged, feeling like they're a part of something.
Yeah.
And so when I came to this TED talk, I had, circumstances in my life that really I feel like converged. And
Mm-hmm.
I saw that it was critical for me to deliver this message. I felt like we do a lot of incredible work at 6 Degrees on these community activations, but I wanted people to feel empowered to take um, everyday individual paths and say, I can show up in this way. I don't need to wait for a charity event. I don't
Yeah.
need to give a bunch of money. I don't need to create some sticky, amazing, glamorous campaign. I can start today. I can make an impact today. Here's the data and the science that shows that this impact is having, measurable outcomes
Mm-hmm.
for me, for my community, for the people around me. And so it was really wonderful to have the support of Kevin and 6 Degrees to share this message. And now we're starting to do work with companies and workforces on a curriculum with their employees. How do we get their employees to to adopt the craft method, to go through kind of a 30-day challenge to see how it
Mm-hmm.
changes how people collaborate, innovate, work together, job satisfaction, turnover, right? When they feel like they're a part of something, part of a community, not just checking a box and checking into work and checking out, especially in these remote environments that make connection all the more difficult.
Mm-hmm. What a story.
Sorry, that's a lot. I know.
Speaking of storytelling, but I love the story of sort of what sometimes we assume is something that is against us. And if we get curious and if something happens where we can open up the door to our unique contribution, right? Whatever that is in the world. And it sounds like Kevin kind of went through that journey for himself. And this is the 40th
40th
anniversary,
anniversary.
and I would have been 14 when it came out. And there will be a time where I will write a letter, not a weird letter, but a letter to Kevin, because
I love it.
it was a big deal for me. And my dad was a pastor back in the day. And I remember
Wow.
really resonating with the message of the movie. And it really
Mhm.
helped me, I think, in many ways, like hundreds of thousands of people, I'm sure, find a voice for what we were feeling. And
Mhm.
for me, just finding a way to dance in my life and in the work that I was doing. And it really, I think about it a lot in the sense of we don't need to be afraid of some of those things that will
Mhm.
hold us back from connecting well, from being ourselves, from contributing. And and the journey to you and your work, and now how you will have this larger, more consistent, more
Mhm.
focused impact even on corporations or teams that are looking, they're saying, I don't even know where to start, right? Like, and if you were to say, to the planners out there, to the people that are
Yeah.
working behind the scenes, many people that I work with here, I coach the teams that are, they won't say they're event planners. They won't say that they're making a whole lot of difference in the world necessarily, but they are working really hard at connecting people through the events that they plan. Would there be a place, would there be something sort of in your experience that you could share with them that they could start with connection, start with
Oh
that,
yeah.
the small things, but then what could they be adding to their planning schedules, to their planning team meetings, that would make a difference, where they could actually start to measure some and track some of those differences that they'll see year over year or event to event, and then start to have, probably in my world, hopefully more connections with the people that they're there to serve.
Yeah. I will start with a story and then I will get tactical. Um, when I moved here from California, it was the first time that I really did professional networking.
Mm,
And it was hard because California is a lot different than the East Coast. I had a lot of friends. I didn't know what they even did for a living at all. I had a friend that worked for a hula hoop company. Don't know what he did there. People always ask me, how did you not ask more questions about that? I don't know. He
I
was just my
know.
friend. We didn't talk about it, right? In DC, it's like the first question people ask. What do you do? Who do you work
Okay.
for? They're sizing you up. Like, how can you fit
Yeah.
into my Rolodex in some type of way that will
Mm,
help me? And I used to hate that. Now I've leaned in and just realized that like that is the world that we live in, and I have to lean in as well if I'm going to
mm,
survive here. But networking was really critical, and I made a point to go to places that I felt welcomed, received. I then offered to get more involved. Eventually, ended up sitting on the board for a couple different chambers in the area. Another nonprofit that I helped served on the board there. I launched a emerging leaders council for one of the chambers, and then I eventually co-founded a TEDx organization myself. And that
mm,
was all because the people in all of those communities I felt connected to, welcomed. They were curious about me, and they really made me feel like I had something to offer. And it
mm.
unlocked something in me, leadership, strategy, things that I had not utilized before. I didn't think that I didn't have a business background, although I did sales my whole life. I never saw myself as a leader, right? And those
Mhm,
things were formative in changing my career. So I say all that to say that event planners have a really, really nice opportunity, powerful opportunity to ensure that when they're planning events, they are thinking about the first moment someone opens up an invitation,
mm.
right? The language they use, is it inviting?
Yeah.
Does it share that there's going to be a place for them, right? That it's not just for this certain type of person or that certain type of person, but that it's inclusive. um Once someone shows up there, are they thinking about that first initial engagement? You've always sometimes come into a place and you're like, where's the check-in? And you're awkward. Are we getting a coffee right now? Are there greeters? Are there people that are just simply thinking, hi, oh, Lisa, it's so good to see you. Oh, who are you with? Oh, okay, Candy Consulting. That's amazing. Oh, you do Oh, have you met George? George actually does some vendor management. You should connect. Oh, and you introduce, and then leaving them to connect, right?
Mhm.
Looking for the
Yeah.
people that are standing by themselves, looking down at their
Mm,
phone. Their
yeah.
phone doesn't mean I'm busy and I don't want to connect. Their phone means I am off. I don't know what to do. I don't know anybody here. I'm doing
Mhm.
something so that I don't have to stand here awkwardly. Okay. That's a sign to go over and say, oh, I'm so sorry for interrupting you. Like, I wanted to introduce myself. Welcome to this event. Make people feel like they belong, like
Mm,
they are seen, right? If you want to
yeah.
grow what you're doing, you want to get good feedback, testimonials, grow your membership and community. So I think that on the planning side, this is something that I've implemented with my teams. Make sure, especially when you're planning an event, it is stressful. It is abundantly stressful. There are just deadlines consistently that you're working towards, and some vendor always backs out, something always falls through, and it can be very stressful. Take the extra time on your one-on-ones, on your group meetings, to have a personal check-in.
Mm,
How's everyone feeling? Can everyone share something positive that happened to them this week? Any plans for the holiday? Right? Like,
yeah.
have a moment to actually say your personal life is seen and relevant and important, and we see you and we care about you. And before it's just, what did you do? What did you deliver on? Who's fixing
Mhm.
this mistake? Right?
Yep.
Event planning can be a high burnout, a lot of turnover.
Mhm.
People can feel really undervalued and under, you know, just like they're it's on to the next. Thank you.
Yes.
And what are you doing for next year's event or next quarter's event?
Yeah.
Right. So I do think that it's important, like in our daily actions, to think about how are we making the people around us feel seen, value, heard, um, above and beyond what they're doing for us.
Mhm. Yeah.
I hope that's helpful. I
Oh,
don't.
it's super helpful. And one thing my mom was a master at was because it was before phones and all sorts of other journaling capturing
Yeah.
devices. But she would write something she learned about something that day in a little notebook. And so when she would be on the phone with them, she would actually flip to their page and she'd be like, oh, well, this person was going through this, or their mom had some challenges, or, they changed jobs or whatever it was. And so I think even as we're doing those check-ins with our teams, it is so easy for event planners and event planning teams to get to the point, to get to the
Yes.
spreadsheet, to get to the checklist. And there's a sense of pride that we've accomplished things. We're very production and program driven, and there's nothing wrong with that. But
Correct.
taking the step back and saying, let's put people before projects, and then remembering them, tracking even what we're hearing from our teams, and remembering their names. That's something I've had to really work at over the years, is remembering names and details and things that in my sort of blinder view of the event don't come into the planning, but they really make a difference on the bigger picture. And so what a beautiful way to end this conversation. A reminder that we are all people looking to be heard and seen. And what a fantastic way for us to lean in with the craft method. Try that with your team today or this week, or as you're planning your next event. Find a place for it where you can have that conversation, where you can actually say, how can we create better connections through the event that we're planning, and use that as a tool. I think, Stacy, that's why you've put it out there, so people can actually start using it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. This has been so much fun.
Oh, I so appreciate it. How can people continue the conversation, learn more about 6 Degrees or your work? How can they get a hold of what you're up to?
I always forget this part. It's like the most important part. I mean, it's not the most important, but it's pretty important. Please go to 6degrees.org. You can learn more about our work on our website, work on every social platform you can think of. We're moving off of X, but we are at 6 Degrees of KB on Instagram, 6degrees.org on LinkedIn and Facebook. We're on TikTok at 6degrees.org and on YouTube on the same. So please do follow us. And we always say, if you're not able to give, like, engaging and sharing and commenting, that really helps us cast a wider net on our stories. And so it's so deeply appreciated. And for me, you can go to stacyhuston.com, and that's spelled like Huston. So STACYHUSTON.com. You can learn a little bit more about the craft method. And we are putting out some tools. There's a book coming in 2025. And so you can subscribe and I'll definitely share. I'm not an over newsletter person, but when there's something important update, I can make sure to connect with my community and let them know. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, and I love to connect and meet more folks that care about social impact.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Stacy. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Appreciate it.